This is a public service announcement for New York City and the greater New York State, brought to you by the NYC Department of Health. My name is Dr. Green, PhD. This bottle contains a relatively new prescription drug commonly referred to as Xanax. It is prescribed to combat acute cases of insomnia as well as acute anxiety. These drugs are only prescribed to those who cannot be helped by much safer, over-the-counter sleeping medication. They should only be used by those they are prescribed to, and at their intended dosage. The danger is heightened particularly in this case, when Xanax, even diluted in water, is given to children. Even near trace amounts have the potential to cause serious harm, especially when administered to minors. Do not share Xanax. If you or a loved one have taken any amount of Xanax that has not been prescribed to you, seek medical attention immediately. Do not wait. Your life could be in danger. Do not share your prescribed medication. Do not administer any amount of Xanax to your children. Their health and well-being is paramount. This has been a public service announcement from the New York City Department of Health. Thank you.
You've never seen it.
I've never seen it.
Oh my.
All right, so for the last two entries, I think, Colin has been making it a point to take us back to the days of the true classics, right?
Yeah.
I figured it would be appropriate for us today to jump a little bit farther forward into the relative modern day, the new millennium. Last month we spent some time learning about the system built around proper film crews, sound stages, sets, and of course the movie stars of the day and age.
Yeah.
This month, I think we're going to go in quite the opposite direction, with sort of guerrilla-style recording in a city stuck out of time, with small-name actors playing less than likable but very human characters.
Yes.
This movie was filmed in New York City and was released in 2009, hot off the heels of a major recession, and it takes place in New York City, circa 1991, hot off the heels of yet another major recession.
Yeah.
Something about life imitating art, art recreating lived experiences, so on and so forth. This movie was filmed on a serious budget and has all the grit to fit with that subject matter. Colin, would you like to take a guess before we open this up? Any chance?
I recommended this movie to Tony. I'm the one who told him to buy it when we were buying Criterions. This is Daddy Longlegs.
Oh, you did a shitty knot that I can't undo. So we're breaking this.
Safdie brothers.
Woo!
Eat ass, motherfucker. I know my shit.
I'm sure the Safdie brothers have or would be willing to eat ass. You'd have to ask them.
I two 30-some Jewish men. I don't know, man. I don't fucking know.
Directed by Josh and Benny Safdie, the Safdie brothers themselves. My experience with the Safdies pretty much only goes as far as Uncut Gems, I think.
Nope.
We
Robert
watched-
Pattinson's Good Time.
Oh, have we watched that?
Yeah,
When did we watch that?
I showed you that a couple years ago. It's the one where Robert Pattinson and his younger brother go to rob a bank.
Oh yeah, no.
Yeah.
Now
So-
I'm remembering.
So Benny Safdie is the younger brother.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I remember this one now. That one was very impactful. That one was another movie
That
about
was the
like-
first Pattinson movie I showed you where you're like, oh, this guy's fucking great.
Yeah.
No, and I recommended this to Tony not because I had watched it, but because I knew the movie itself, and I'm like,
Want to run through your experience?
yeah, and I'm like, Safdie, yes, buy this, and you're just like, okay.
Okay. You want to run through your experience with Safdie films? Any further than what we just talked about?
First one I watched was Good Time, and I think Good Time is a seriously important work as far as setting up What I was hoping, like the early, late 2010s to like early 2020s was going to be before COVID happened, which I was hoping we were going to get the 90s part 2, and the 90s, and the 90s itself is the 70s part 2.
Yeah.
Which is, I was hoping we would get an era of like creator-driven auteur films that were really built around the idea of, we have a story, we don't have money to properly do this, we're gonna make the movie exactly how we want to do it, and hopefully a studio will buy this at some point.
Yeah.
And obviously Uncut Gems, which I made you watch, and that was your first experience.
I was not convinced Adam Sandler could do anything good ever.
And then I showed him Punch Drunk Love a couple years later,
and now
you
I am
ate
convinced.
your fucking words.
I ate it like a fist to the face.
Besides that, though, like, I know about this, and I know about their first or second film. I can't remember off the top of my head. I've always been really interested to check this
believe
out.
it is the Pleasures of Being Robbed, starring Ronald Bronstein, editor, writer, collaborator with the Safdies on a couple other films before this.
Yeah.
Eleanor Hendricks, who is from Pleasure of Being Robbed.
Okay.
And Frey and Sage, the sons of Lee Ronaldo from the band Sonic Youth. All the three Sonic Youth fans that I know, I'm sorry I don't know your guys' music. I tried for 30 seconds and I gave up. It was about the late 2000s. Digital technology was starting to make it more and more possible for movies like this to get made. Not because it's made digitally, but because like the big names were moving towards digital and kind of abandoning all like old film technology. So I think right around this point, it was like starting to get a little cheaper to use like film cameras.
No. Film is far more expensive than digital still. The reason why they were switching over to digital cameras is because digital was becoming slowly more cheaper than shooting on film. Around this point, it's 2009, this was when the rise of the Arri Alexa was starting to become popular, which is a look I'm starting to become very nostalgic for. It's what films like Nightcrawler were shot on, which has this border look. It's not as clean as modern digital, but it doesn't have this exact soft look as film. And I understand it's probably just because a lot of my films that I loved during my teenage years were shot on that, so it's more so just a sentiment. More than likely.
IMDb lists that the Safdies picked up Super 16 cameras for this, and more specifically the Arriflex 416. So that's what they were using for this whole thing.
The Arriflex is the digital, or is the analog ancestor for the Arri Alexa, which is like the great-great-grandbuddy.
So I'm assuming they just found like some camera that was either cheap to rent or cheap like to get, and they made this shit happen.
So 16 millimeter is in theory really cheap to shoot on until you start like actually buying film stock and understanding film stock ends up lasting like 10 minutes per reel. It's one of those, it's a slow build-up costing shoot unless you're doing like what I know they do with this, which is just kind of, as you already said, guerrilla style shooting on the streets, not really framing shots with a lot of intent, just being like, go over there, we're gonna film this from like 90 feet away.
It's some of that, it's some more intimate shot sort of things. It never goes quite like Matt Johnson, where it's people speaking straight into the camera.
Well, that's like fake, like faux docu style.
So. It never quite does that. It straddles a line. Any other little points you want to bring up about this movie before we just bite straight into it?
About the film itself, like I said, I don't really know much about it besides I know this is like primarily based off of their childhood. This was their dad. Is the big thing going into it. And this is also primarily who Howie from Uncut Gems was based off of, Adam Sandler's character. Not this guy, but their dad. They pulled a lot of shit from their dad because their dad was like, no, we love this man, but he's kind of a fucking scumbag.
Welcome to a Safdie Brothers production.
Your dad was a movie buff.
We were gonna go skiing in like Vermont.
And we stayed at the Happy Bear Motel.
So we go to this motel and there's a big snowstorm coming. He's like, all right, we're gonna go to the video store. And he picks up The Shining and Misery. And those are the movies that we're gonna watch
the double feature for the
as
evening.
the snow piles up.
I don't know anything about the contents of the film itself, but I know about sort of
The general conceit.
And I've been, like I said, interested to check this out. I just haven't really had any kind of opportunity to do so.
All right. With that being said, why don't you all come with us into the city that never sleeps, the city of a million dramas, NYC. We'll see you on the other side.
So fucking fucked up.
You have two choices right now. One is you continue acting the way that you're acting and you watch me blow my top. Or two, I hang up on you. Goodbye, goodbye, goodbye. You see that, guys? That was awesome, huh? Now I'm mad! Ah!
Yeah, get it, quick.
You're here, finally. You're not responsible enough to be here to pick them up.
It's my screw up. I'm entitled to screw up, and you can screw up for the rest of the year. How you guys doing? Comfortable?
No.
All right. 1, 2, 3.
Are you their father?
Yes.
Well, you have some parenting to do.
Do not reprimand me in front of my own kids.
It's a really stupid idea.
I think it's a great idea.
still-
I think you're a stupid idea.
I'm not resisting.
This is what it's like being inside my brain right now. That's incredible. That's incredible.
So, Colin, would you like to summarize the movie we just watched today? Would you like to summarize Daddy Longlegs?
Yeah, sure. So Daddy Longlegs is the story of a man torn between two kind of disparate worlds, one of his own making and one very much systemic issue. We have what is essentially a Paul Schrader character, Paul Schrader being the writer of films such as like Taxi Driver,
Yeah.
Last Temptation of Christ, First Reformed. Guy worked with Scorsese quite a bit. But ostensibly like a Paul Schrader protagonist who has the responsibility of being a father.
Which is great combination right there.
Yeah, no, it has kind of limitless story potential, and throughout this, we end up sort of watching him struggle to have the basics of what a father should be because of both a refusal to grow up and also sort of the financial situation that he is stuck in.
This is fucking disgusting.
That is hair. Excuse
all
me, do not use that kind of language here.
Don't reprimand me in
That
front of my
hair
children. Do
came
not
from-
reprimand me in front of my own kids, all right? All right?
Excuse me, that hair came from one of his classmates, Brandon.
And there's a lot of room and a lot of gaps left into how much of this is his fault, what was the relationship between him and his ex, whether it be wife or just girlfriend, someone he knocked up, and a lot of it's just kind of like left in the margins as to what.
You get little hints of like how bad the breakup was.
Yeah.
They mention pretty early on, he goes upstate and she makes a big deal out of it. And he says, well, it's not like I left the state.
Yeah, no, there's some implication that he probably did some time at some point, and
it's a very awkward situation. Man's got these kids for 2 weeks and he's trying to just make them not forget him, I guess, because he's got basically nothing else in his life.
Sage!
Hi, baby!
Over here, I need some help. All right, what do you want me to catch for dinner tonight? Salmon, all right. All right. I learned this in the Army. All right, anchor me, I got one! I got one! Ah, got away, hang on.
Speaking on the main character, focusing a little bit on Lenny, our main guy. Colin, what do you feel about him? Like, let's start just as a character, like not as a person, but just as a character. Like, how well do you think this character's been crafted?
It's an excellently crafted character, and I think a distinction you kind of need to be making when talking about a character like Lenny is a similar distinction that you need to make when you're talking about sort of any 70s era protagonist, which I very much feel like Lenny is modeled after, which is sort of like an anti-hero. You need to distinguish the difference between sympathy and empathy.
Yeah.
Sympathy is a whole different thing than empathy, and like the definitions of the words plot and story, I feel like are two things that aren't distinguished often enough. I empathize a lot with Lenny. Yeah. Lenny is a character who clearly has a lot of shit that has gone wrong in his life that needs to be like understood. I do not sympathize with him though.
You're here, finally.
I apologize.
Okay.
Unreservedly.
Listen.
All right.
You
What are you
guys,
doing
I love
here?
You. Mwah. Mr.
What are you doing here?
Mr. Puccio had to call me.
You have no
because-
business being here.
Listen,
okay?
these are my kids. What am I going to do? Just leave them standing
Okay, I
here waiting
apologize.
for you
Something
when you're
came
not
up at work.
around?
I apologize, okay? But
Listen,
you know what?
You know what?
This is my
has gotta
time.
s-
You know
You're
what?
not responsible enough to be here to pick them up.
All right, the kids
You guys
have been
gotta
told
go to
in
your
advance
father.
that if Daddy has an emergency,
They are
they're going
too
to sit
young
and
to
wait.
be
There's no
sitting
danger
on
in
this
that.
You can empathize with some of the worst characters in fiction and with some of the worst people just in real life.
Yeah.
Without, sympathizing for them. You can come at it like understanding the many, problems. Like, he's clearly just a bugged out kind of weirdo. 100%, I believe this guy exists just out there.
And the fact that this is very much based off of their father, adds like a whole layer of like it adds a whole personal touch to the story, while simultaneously, like you're able to pull a lot from that and sort of understand what their childhood was, and also that distinguishes then the kind of art that they make, and I feel like makes the Safdies as people make a little more sense. And kind of something I want to bring up with Lenny, I guess that's kind of interesting, and it does what a good anti-hero should always do, which is take a little bit of the heat off of them, understand that not everything is their fault, but not let the entirety of the blame be taken away from them.
Yeah.
Lenny is a person that is partially a victim of circumstance.
Yeah.
The capitalist system has made it both impossible for single fathers to function in a way that like is any kind of like sociable or makes any kind of real sense, and also has made it to where he can't really scale up. He is working a minimum wage theater job. This is the job I had in my early 20s.
Yeah.
Okay, not the exact same job, but it's one of those things where like that sort of job, while it should be open to be working for much younger people, it's not something that like is necessarily designed for him. Like on basis, those jobs are almost designed for teenagers. But that being said,
it's kind of all that's left sometimes.
It's all that's left, and yes, the system has fucked him over.
Yeah.
But simultaneously, how much of it is the system fucking him over, and how much of it is any kind of real ambition that he does or does not have?
He's played very, very well. It's a great voice, great like presence on screen. He really makes you believe that he's just what's the word? A cunt, a little bit.
Yeah.
He played a very good cunt.
Yeah.
Speaking of, what do you think about Lenny as a person? And like, when did you realize at some point that like, oh, this is not a good person?
The
like
opening shot. So the whole thing about the opening is the fact that he is immediately from the get-go, and this is where the Safdies are brilliant filmmakers, are trying to con a guy out of a singular hot dog.
Yeah. The foot-long hot dog. Can I get a foot-long hot dog? Oh man, can you just put them together like that?
Yeah, no, he is trying to essentially, from the get-go, take advantage of what is like a small little business's fucking like own mantra, just from the outset. You know, you understand that from the get-go, and his concern for his children's safety, because he's not buying this for him. It's for my kids because I'm picking them up from school. And then he immediately drops the hot dogs in the grass, laughs his ass off about it because he fell off the fence, and then picks them up and is going to serve them to his children. Okay, it's selfishness masquerading as some kind of care and intent towards his children. I do believe he gives a fuck about his kids. I very much think that. But I do think it is a 50-50 shot between him and his children.
Yeah, there's two shots basically that like solidified first that he's not a good person, and then second that he's not a very good father.
Yeah.
That scene like with the vet where he's panhandling and Lenny comes along and basically teaches his kids at that moment to taunt him.
Yeah.
Like bad person, terrible person, awful person.
Man, you're addressing the wrong guy. This is the bank. Show him what you got. Show him what you got. Don't give it to him. Don't give it to him. I said show it to him.
I bet you got some money in your pocket. I bet you got some money.
And I think the point in which I said like, okay, you're even a bad father. Like there's nothing, when he leaves his kids alone to go to a bar to hook up with some lady.
Yeah.
And then like, it's crazy. He hooks up with someone even though he's already got a girlfriend.
Yeah.
And he just leaves them there because they're sleeping, they're fine. You know, that's not going to come around to bite him in the ass like halfway through this film, right?
Yeah.
It's they make it pretty clear and pretty evident early on that Lenny's not somebody that you're supposed to sympathize with. You maybe empathize at the most.
I very much do empathize with him, and kind of a point I guess I want to make that was sort of a, if intentional, a very interesting and smart casting choice on the part of the Safdies. You said, did you say this guy was also in their previous movie?
Yeah, let me check real quick. It is starring Ronald Bronstein. He was editor, writer, and collaborator on like a couple films that they did before this. So they worked together.
Okay, so you brought up his voice earlier.
Yeah.
Have I shown you anything with George Clooney in it?
Oh, probably. I know who George Clooney is, and yeah, no, it's a very distinct voice.
So in the 90s, George Clooney was sort of like the big thing, and this movie takes place in the 90s. George Clooney is sort of like this big movie star that even if you don't know him, like, you know what his face looks like, is my point. He is sort of signifier for charming, you can trust me kind of guy, right? Yeah. Even if a lot of his early roles didn't fit into that past ER, you know, he's from Dusk Till Dawn, which he's a fucking scumbag in, and he's so fucking good. But our lead protagonist has George Clooney's voice.
No.
All right, take a look at
Just
this.
shut your mouth. Shut up.
Everybody be cool. You be cool.
Do not reprimand me in front of my own kids, all right?
Yes, you. Shut up and start the car, all right? Start the car. Start the car. You know that? Shut the fuck up and start the car. Wait. I believe you. Start the car!
Like, I will put audio clips of them like right next to each other. I didn't want to bring that up during the movie, but it's eerie. And then on top of that, he has George Clooney's facial structure, which is a very long, pronounced fucking chin.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's intentional, but to me it almost feels like this thing where you're offering your audience an invitation to trust someone. Because guys, this is the guy you all know and love. And to me, I guess, like, the step then that taking, like, casting someone that looks or sounds like Clooney is you're getting the general public then to, even if not like directly, but almost like psychologically empathize with someone, because you automatically, a lot of times with people, have sort of a parasocial relationship with a lot of these celebrities, and there's some automatic trusting going on with that.
So we've already talked, you know, the whole conceit about the film, how Lenny is based off of like their father. Generally, the way it went was, they saw Bronstein working on Frownland, which is like a very, very, very like low budget, incredibly like YouTube era, like almost barely a film kind of film. They saw him accept an award for it at South by Southwest, and they realized he can play silly, he can play over the top. They also saw him working on his sister's movie, Yeast. This is by Mary Bronstein, and they saw him as an editor in that place, and he's very serious and very like in his work and very like, and they said, okay, this dude can do both. They had a book written up called Go Get Some Rosemary, and they didn't end up even showing him the book. They just like hashed out the character over many like dinner meetings and stuff, and they like more or less hashed out the whole story and Lenny's character and stuff. Yeah. It's one of those things where they just knew the guy and they said, you gotta be him. And I think it's a very good casting choice. This film also has some other decent starring roles, so they're not like as big as Lenny. For example, Lenny, his girlfriend, is played by Eleanor Hendricks. What do you think about her in this movie for the few scenes that you've seen her?
So, once again, just a really important kind of casting decision in that. They cast someone who's clearly at least like 10 years younger than our lead in the first place. Once again, kind of just playing into this whole irresponsibility and immaturity of the whole idea of his character is that, like, dating someone in his age range, it's not even just a thing of like, oh, I'm attracted to younger girls or something like that. Dating someone in his age range, he thinks gets him a get out of jail free card, because he's inherently dating someone that he probably views as more immature than he is.
Yeah, he can do things and just be like, you gotta come along with me, I know better than you, sort of thing. It's part of like not wanting to grow up a little bit.
Well, I would say, like, yeah, in theory he thinks he can do that.
Yeah.
But the problem that you sort of end up assessing with that whole ideal throughout this is that doesn't end up being the case. you know, we have one scene where they kind of like are together with the kids and everything's like working out in the beginning to begin with, but then as the scene goes on, he ends up trying to fucking like bring in his kids because he feels some kind of ownership over them, even though he's ostensibly running them out for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Out of the entire year.
In his mind, he's like trying to make sure that these kids love him and like respect him. And he's only got these 2 weeks, so anything that pulls away attention from him is a threat. And I think Lenny as a character, I think Eleanor plays her very, very well. It's kind of a muted strong woman, if that makes any sense. It's like she is willing to like put up with enough shit to help out these kids and to like try and resolve stuff. But she has a moment where she walks the rails and says, "I'm done," you know.
I don't think it's as much like a strong woman archetype as much as it is just a realistic portrayal of a person who doesn't want to fucking put up with a child's fucking garbage at the end of that. And I think she understands that like by entertaining his behavior, she's also making life more difficult for those children as a whole. Yeah. Like the final moment I feel like where she says that she's, or not says, but like kind of comes to terms with the fact that she's done tolerating his shit is when she watches him crush up the pills and then watches him fucking have those kids knocked out for however many days. She just kind of washes her hands of the guy because at that point she realizes like, I'm not good for you, you're not good for me, and at the end of the day, ultimately, you're not good for these kids, period, but while I'm around, it's just another distraction.
It's that he does that to like every person in his life, friends, family, whatever. He just pushes them and pushes them and pushes them, and then eventually they leave and he throws a fit about like, you know, whatever.
That's the very on the nose metaphor of the mosquito. He's a fucking parasite. When I say on the nose, I just want to, you know, comment again. I'm not using that as an insult. Metaphor should have the ability to just be obvious and on the nose. That doesn't matter. It's all about execution. And I think it's kind of integral and important to the story by the end that the filmmakers themselves are acknowledging in some kind of visual fashion.
Yeah, they need you to know what they're trying to say, and they're going to say it very clearly with what budget they've got for the giant mosquito.
I was joking too. Mosquitoes do not exist at that size. They don't exist in this apartment at that size. Only in the world of jokes are there mosquitoes that big. All right, guys, come on, dunk your heads.
Real quick, how do you think Sage and Frey did as like child actors, like barometer for them?
The thing that I guess like I appreciated about it is I don't feel like a lot of their dialogue was really all that scripted. So it just kind of gave them a chance to sort of record kids acting naturalistically without them being like too needing to stick to a rigid script. I'm also a person that believes, hey, you can fuck off when you're trying to be like too like scrupulous with child actors. It's not something that like I don't want to get into labor laws on this fucking video.
It really is like a relaxed sort of like filming environment when it mentions the kids or when the kids are on set. They made great efforts, Safdies did, to not expose them to like the really harsh parts of the story. To just give them the broad strokes of like what they're feeling and where they're going, what's going on, without being like, oh yeah, your dad is arguing with your mom because they hate each other. You know, he's not exposing them directly to that. And you'll see a lot of the times they're like, you never see like him on the phone right next to the kids, like literally in the same shot, so that they don't have to like expose them to that kind of adult like awfulness.
No, and I mean most like responsible productions are supposed to do that in the first place. And it's just essentially editing around that kind of stuff. I mean, I know you were bringing up like, oh, you know, the guy with his like dick and balls hanging out and everything at the pool stand and everything. It's one of those things where like that is broken down kind of into 3 shots, and that's something that you put down on a shot list. I don't think this movie was extensively storyboarded or they had a shot list or anything. A lot of it is just this very relaxed kind of loosey-goosey handheld feeling thing. I think they had an idea of like, we'll break this down into close-ups, we'll break this down into da-da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah.
But a lot of it is kind of integral, or a lot of like the integral moments of the movie are shot in this way that feels very determined by the flow of the way the actors are moving throughout a lot of it. I don't know anything about the behind the scenes of this, so to me at least it very much feels like they were given an outline for a scene, what's supposed to happen here, and they weren't really given like explicit dialogue, just kind of broad strokes. This is where the scene starts, this is where it needs to end.
Yeah, they would just tell them like, basically, here's what needs to happen, here's the sort of things you need to say, don't worry about making it perfect. And they just let kids, you know, blah, blah, blah their way through it, and that's fine, because they're kids. Speaking of the way this this film has been shot, you know, making sure that kids are not exposed to like the really harsh themes of the film, how do you feel about just the general cinematography? Like, we were talking earlier about like, yeah, they use these like cameras because I figured they were just like cheap, or like that they were getting cheaper or more affordable for people to use at that point in time. But
basically once you get up to like past 16mm cameras are significantly less portable. And in 2009, a 16mm camera, while not small, is much easier to like hide and condense. They're shooting it in the 90s. You inherently want some kind of grit to it, but especially if you're going around shooting in New York City, one of the big things that you're probably going to want, because a digital camera that you were going to put onto like a movie theater screen was not that small yet. In 2009, they're filming in 2008, I would assume. These smaller little 16mm cameras are much easier to conceal. Say, if the cops show up and ask, what are you doing? Do you have a permit for this? I see you screaming with a bunch of kids around. What the fuck is going on? Every time you get a close-up shot while they're out in public, you're like, oh, well, you know, you have these like close intimate shots. That's not really guerrilla style. No, that is very guerrilla style because it's lower angle, because they're basically having to shoot from the hip. They're having to shoot from the hip, and it's going upwards most of the time. And that's not to establish dominance. That's so you don't put this over your shoulder and immediately have a New York cop show up to your fucking side while you're filming and tell you to put the fucking camera away.
16 mil, very like gritty, very like, it's an aesthetic choice, obviously, I think. And it fits with the vibe, fits with the characters, and it's great for like capturing just weirdo individual New Yorkers, right? Do you have a favorite? Like a favorite like just strange person in this film?
I mean, I like the weird bodega man who shows up with the candy and the cigar, who is kind of implicitly almost a pedophile. Because that just to me kind of summarizes the kind of, as from a storytelling perspective, and if we're going to go into themes at some point, kind of summarizes why the dad isn't really a good choice or person to be hanging around with these children, because these are the kinds of people that he views as like safe to be around his kids. And I kind of just want to get into like the, I guess kind of like overt theming for what I guess this movie is trying to say.
Get into it.
So I guess for me at least, the theme of the movie that it's generally trying to ask, because a lot of themes can be implicit questions, is what is a good parental figure? It is a question you are asked back and forth throughout the entire movie. And if you wanted a nice, clean Hollywood answer to this, they would have had the mom just outright be just a shrill, stereotyped, annoying, cunty woman. They couldn't do that. And I guess kind of the thing that I appreciate about this, especially towards the end, is what the father and his portrayal kind of ultimately mean to the story, is that he is not trying to be a good father. He wants his kids to like him. It's not about love to me. Because if you were worried about your children loving you, you would more so be worried about their safety. You'd be worried about that. He wants to essentially be their uncle, which having them 2 weeks a year the entire time leads to that. And not a good uncle either. You're like, oh, he wants to remember them. No. Yes, he does want them to like remember him, but he wants to have memories in their head. He is trying to create essentially like Kodak moments for these children without understanding what he's inflicting by trying to do this isn't really all that great. And then you have the mother character who they spend a lot of time showing his reactions to her and sort of showing her in like bits and pieces and showing that she's just really upset with the way that she's being taught. But they hold off showing how these kids live when they're not at their dad's house.
Yeah.
And then you finally see it, and his entire motivation and insecurities both make sense and also just feel that much more pathetic.
Yeah.
Yes, no, you have this whole systemic issue that he cannot afford to live in a better place, while simultaneously his ex-wife, his ex-girlfriend, whatever, is now living in this place, whether it be because of her own money, her husband that she now has.
Yeah, better choices that she might have made.
Yeah.
Like,
and at the end of the day, these kids, from their perspective, their dad may be more fun, and she may probably be a bit more intimidating, and you get that shot of her being like, work on your homework right now. She's a better parent.
Yeah.
She is trying to make sure that these kids not only get an education, do everything correctly, she is more concerned with their well-being as a whole, and I don't think ever goes out of their way to make these kids feel like fearful or feel like shit.
Yeah, she creates structure in these kids' life, which they need to go back to. I think there's one very specific shot that totally encapsulates this. Towards the end of the film, and he says, what are we eating? And he says, well, it's Lenny's surprise. And one of the kids just says, oh God.
What are we having
Sage,
for
you're in
dinner?
charge. We're having Lenny surprise.
Oh God.
Chicken Lenini.
Yeah, no.
And it just totally encapsulates these kids having a good time with their dad for as long as it lasts, but 2 weeks is the limit for them. Even they are like, I gotta go back to like normalcy.
No, because when their mom finally picks them up, you were pointing out like, oh, well, she's trying to get them away as fast as possible. No, these kids want to go. He's literally holding on to them by their fucking hoods.
I know you guys don't want to go. Come on, run. Guys, I'm serious. You're late. Go. I know you
Here's a
guys.
taxi, you guys.
Seriously,
Come on.
no joke. It's time. They don't
Look at, I
wanna
got
leave.
treats. I got treats.
I'm just joking.
There's a gag in the first act where he's holding the kids and the kids are like trying to break away. He's like, they're holding on to me and whatever. And they bring that all the way back around in the middle of the third act to say like, oh no, this is a problem. It's not just him being a funny dad. That's his issue. That's his whole problem.
No, if he can't take care of these kids in the first place, and he is destructive towards himself, now he has to take care of these other children. And that is kind of like blown up in the climax in this whole thing where it's like finally the insecurity of what his ex-wife said to him has gotten to him. Where she says, I could easily get custody of these kids if I wanted to. And he knows what kind of house she lives in. He knows the better life that these kids are having outside of that. So when they come back from getting food, when he says, I'm gonna make you a nice home-cooked meal, after ostensibly kidnapping them.
Yeah, and now he's literally kidnapping them.
Yeah.
He's just packed everything up and is going to just go away to 34th Street, supposedly 34th Street. I think they take a tram, which I don't know which one it is. I know there's one that goes out of New York City, which that would be, that would bring something all the way back around. I went upstate, I didn't take them out of the state or anything.
Yeah.
Which, if that is true, then that would like come back around.
Now he's trying to like take them to what he views as like what she's giving them. He is trying to prove himself by getting out of the literal squalor. It doesn't matter where he's going. He is at the bottom. And oftentimes in film, sort of easy visual representation, you haven't seen Parasite, you haven't seen High and Low. A good, easy way to represent sort of like classes and classism and like poverty versus higher class stuff is you just portray like the lower class literally living at the bottom in the trenches of a fucking city, and then you have them literally ascended to a mountain on their own personal property. They do it in High and Low, they do it in Parasite. He is literally trying to ascend to the top with everything he owns on his back like a beggar turtle. Yeah. It's visual storytelling that it's like you can't ascend the top when all you have is a refrigerator full of your shit.
And lastly, all of these visual tricks and all this cinematography and acting is all wrapped really well together with their choice of music. Once again, Tony's Music Hour.
Tony's Music Hour!
Most of these tracks are from the 1950s. Like a lot of them are licensed, either very cheaply licensed or however that works out. They're all like 1950s songs, like from the Jubilaries. That's the first one on his mixtape.
Yeah.
It's all very nostalgic. It fits with the character Lenny that would have been when he was like a kid.
Yeah.
And very key moments and very key things happen to him and around him when he's playing music, like trying to literally recreate his like childhood and like an easier and more friendlier time in his life, right?
There's that, and also I think it sort of, from my memory at least, happened during his moments of isolation.
Yeah.
Even when he like say is like with his kids or with this random fucker going upstate with these people,
everyone's asleep.
Everyone's asleep. He is by himself, and it's sort of this moment to where he can sort of have some kind of comfort in his own solitude, which would also go in explaining like why he doesn't want the kids to leave or why he doesn't want his girlfriend to not go. In his own solitude is when he's at his worst.
And he just wants to create that like comfort around him and to like protect and shield himself from like the outside world and from his own like mistakes, I think.
And once again, maybe this whole thing of just you know, trauma is a fucking, it's a cycle. It just happens over and over again, and the further you perpetuate it and spread it throughout, like whether it be your childhood or your kid's childhood, it'll end up being never ending if you don't try and do anything about it. I think almost the implicit idea there is the fact that maybe he is trying to do this with his kids the same way that his dad made his childhood feel some kind of special in some kind of way, but maybe his dad was just as much of like a sleazebag as he was and not around or anything like that.
Along with like Jubilaries tracks, there's also some that are just made for this film, which I'm really sad to say I can't find anywhere on the internet. It's like there's one song by David Sandholm. He's just one of these guys that they've worked with on other films and on other like sort of things, and he made a song just for this one. But I don't know which one it is, and I can't like just find it on the internet, and it really makes me sad because that means I gotta go back to this film to hear this soundtrack again. It's one of those things.
Reddit, do your thing.
If you can find it, please. I'd love to hear it. I'm not even joking. I'd love to know. I'm sure there's a way to tell, like in the credits, they list them all out. Is it like they listed out by their appearance, like the cast, or?
Well, you know, they basically like they have all these separate songs, and then there are credited writers and composers and everything. That's why I always keep the credits on while we're watching movies afterwards.
So I'll have to go back and make sure that I do that, because some of these like little weird tracks, be it for the mosquito or for like them walking down with their dad on like 27th or whatever, it's all great. The music really just brings everything together. And I think that pretty much covers everything. Colin, is there any last little snippet, any last little thing you want to address?
So I guess kind of my wrapping up thoughts, this kind of comes back around to what we talked about earlier, or at least the point that I brought up. I brought up that like the new wave of Hollywood, I thought was like, okay, we're gonna get a comeback, the 90s part 2 in sort of like the early to like late 2010s and everything. And once again, who knows? That may still end up happening because retrospect and hindsight in 2020 and everything like that. But to me, at least, this is the kind of thing I was talking about when I said you get sort of a bunch of like super creative people together and you have them with a story they want to tell being the most important thing, not the style or anything like that. Like we've talked in the past about something like, say, Emesis Blue, and that sort of being like almost like a tech demo or showing off their talents. It's like it didn't feel like they really had like a overall story that was personal to them that they wanted to tell. This really kind of captures the era of the new wave of Hollywood that I really like. Because this, I wouldn't say is plotless. I actually think it's pretty standardized if you just break down a lot of the beats, but it has this free-forming flow to it. That gives me the same sort of emotions of something like Easy Rider, which if you haven't watched Easy Rider, watch Easy Rider. It's fucking great. But it's just this sort of feeling of like people got together and made something because it meant something personal to them instead of making art for the sake of doing a job or being contracted and trying to make someone else's vision their own, like sort of reverse engineering it. And I think that ends up making stuff like this pretty special.
It's the opposite of cynicism. It's just very honest and very genuine about everything.
I would call this movie pretty fucking cynical if I'm being
it's pretty cynical, but the intentions of like making the film, it's very honest and it's very specific about what it wants to
do. The intentions behind this feel similar to the decisions behind a film made by a YouTuber I watch, and someone who has helped me a lot with my own filmmaking. His feature debut, Unsound by Darius Britt. Similar setup, not in sort of like the way these kids are treated, but it's about his mother sort of dealing with her own mental illness and drug use and all this kind of stuff. And it deals with very similar topics that could be viewed as cynical, but it's very personal to him. It's on free. It's for free. It's on YouTube. It's on his channel. Go check that shit out.
New York has been interesting and has proven itself to be full of stories that are all worthy of being told. But I've had enough of the city that never sleeps, personally. And I'm ready to get back to life and to preparing for the next episode of the list. And I can't wait to dive back into the past with you. And I can't wait to see all of you guys again.
I'm going back to my little Brooklyn borough for me personally, so.
This is actual home.
I live in a sewer grate.